So, here's a little story about what happened in the whole situation in Greenland between the United States. Things that, or news, or information that might not be spread in American media, things that, facts that the Americans might not be aware of that did happen. For obvious reasons, because it was a disaster for the United States, so I don't think that they would be willingly talking about it. Both sides, for obvious reasons, because the United States, as we all know, look, first of all, I like the American people, never had a problem with them, and the contrary, every time we hanged around, we got along fine. Um, I usually end up helping them. They're very good people. Many of them are actually, to my surprise, are very innocent people, like candid, almost. And this is why I ended up usually helping them. I remember this morning, like time I got late. I came in the second after like during the second uh, class period. And there was this exchange student, and he has been there like for 3 weeks already. And he was still looking like, and he was just wandering across the corridors of the high school. And then I asked him, "Oh, what are you doing? Did you also get late?" He said, "No, I can't find my class." So, yeah, this is my general experience with Americans. Good people, very good people. Um, But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm just here to say I have no hard feelings towards American people in general. But your government for the last 35 years, geez. So there was this situation in Greenland some time ago, and I know some people think it's old news, but no, it's very relevant news because something has been prepared, is being concocted. Vance's career, like Vance was put there. They say, oh, he was very ambitious. He did things. He might be ambitious. I don't question that. However, it is very clear he's working for someone. Someone put him there. Someone is funding him. Someone is investing him. People know his name. He's a big shot, like he's a billionaire, I believe. And he's investing in Vance, and Vance is one of his pupils, one of his students, one of his disciples almost. So the guy has kind of a clutch over Vance's head. And Vance, because Vance strikes me as Stingray from Cobra Kai. And I even decided to check because in Cobra Kai they make clear allusion to the generations, right? And they didn't show much of the millennials. They showed a lot about the Gen Xers, and that's like they nailed it. And they showed a lot about the Gen Z. That I have kids who are happen to be Gen Z, and I actually watched the series together, and it was like my kids that are Gen Z. They really loved it. They said they nailed it. The Gen Z generation. Their worries, their concerns, the way that they tend to act. So it was a fantastic series. It was very good series. And I was wondering about the millennials because they are the generation in between. And then there was this character of Stingray that for a Gen Xer, no offense, millennials, however, like many of us millennials, some of us, maybe not many, but some of us like to call it the ugly Betty generation because it has a lot to do like the Ugly Betty. If you never watched the series, do watch at least to have a general idea. It was very popular during the millennial period, and it nailed the millennials, their concerns, the way that they behave, the way that the boomers literally preside over them, uh, and the way that they kowtow to the boomers. It was very, very plausible. Let's put it that way. But Stingray from Cobra Kai, he nails the millennial generation, at least how Gen Xers perceive them. And when I saw Vance, I couldn't believe it because he was like in the beginning, especially when he just got in as vice president. He was very chubby. He used to be very chubby, kind of very Stingray like, and the similarities were kind of very interesting. And I thought, no, it can't be, because I was considering if he would be a Gen Xer, but as his behavior shows later on, he wasn't. He was a clear millennial. Then I had no doubt. Okay, that's just like Stingray from Cobra Kai, and I think that the relationship he might have with Trump might be similar to the relationship he had with Silver, like that Stingray had with Silver. I'm even starting to confuse both of them. The thing is, the situation in Greenland and Vance is being created because I have reasons to conclude that he will try, or they will try to elect him a decade or some years from now as president. So they're preparing him, and Trump literally used him in this situation in Greenland. The Americans, what they did there, they attempted gunboat diplomacy, as they used to do in the Pacific and in the Caribbean. They tried to do that with Denmark, but it failed miserably, and it did fail because first Vance, he went there to meddle, to try to meddle in the Greenland election, because the Greenlanders, they were voting to be free from Denmark, and if they would be free or if they would continue to be Denmark. And Vance showed up and he tried to propose that Greenland should join the U.S. And Greenlanders, they're not fools. They checked the like they compared, right, what would happen to Greenland. They saw Guam, for instance, that is a territory, and it's very appalling in comparison to Denmark, because, for instance, if they would have ever joined the United States, they wouldn't have a real representative, like, or representatives of Greenland in the American Congress, for instance. They would be at the mercy of the federal state, or federal government, not state, although there is a federal state, but you get the point. Of the federal government, they wouldn't have a proper representative. And taxations without representation, that's something that the Greenlanders definitely don't want to be. So, taxed without being represented. That would happen in Greenland. Somebody suggested, oh, they would be treated like Alaska, that Alaska receives funding, and every people who live in Alaska receive some extra because, look, the Greenlanders, they receive a lot of opportunities with the Danes. Many of them work for Maersk. That is a transport company, Danish company, that carries a lot of the international seawater transportations are carried through Maersk. Everybody might have heard that name. They might have seen in several, even American movies, when they do chases through the container area in harbors. There's always a Maersk, a light blue container of several, with the icon, the symbol, the star. Actually, very beautiful story about that star. How A.P. Møller family, like the family that technically owns Maersk, got it as their coat of arms, as their. It's very recent. It's like three, four generations top that they have been wealthy. They were really, really humble or origins. They were really simple people. The I might tell that story some other day, or maybe I tell now so you can have a general idea about this fantastic company. They were very religious, and they used to transport the. It was just um, a couple. They were a young couple. They just got married, and they worked in transporting goods between Denmark and England. And then um, this Möller family, they did this transportation in a boat, in a small boat. So they would take packages and they would transport to England back and forth. And one night, and it was during night, there was a storm, and the storm catch them, and the young woman, she was pregnant of their first son, who would inherit the company. And but that storm catch the young couple in high seas when they were in the high seas, and whomever knows anything about the Northern Sea, oh, you have no idea. And very cold water. So if you fall in the water, right, like the cold will suck your warmth in a matter of minutes. So they were desperate, and the baby was she pregnant or did she have the baby? I'm not sure because it was long ago that I heard that story. People can check and confirm. And uh, they were afraid because the sky was completely black, right, because of the storm, like so, and the waves. And it was in the middle, like in between England and Denmark. Not the best place to be caught in a North Atlantic or Northern Sea storm. Um, so they they were really going to die because he couldn't really navigate or find any point of direction to navigate in any position. The compass had fallen into the sea, so they were doomed. And then in the high peak, and the worst possible moment, after hours of him trying to battle the storm there with his young wife, pregnant or with a small child, I'm not sure. I'm almost certain she was pregnant. He he started praying. They started praying, and he prayed while he was steering, trying to steer the boat. He prayed to God that he never asked anything, but he because he had a young wife and she was carrying a baby, and he didn't know what to do, so he asked God to show him at least one star so he could guide himself out of the storm, so he could figure where he was. And when he asked that, in the same minute, there was a light in the sky, and the sky had opened a bit, a spot in the sky. And then there was, I believe it to be the Northern Star in the sky. And then he could find the possible horizon and navigate into safety to England. And he arrived there, they survived, and that's when he put the star, as far as I remember, as the story goes, as the symbol of his small company. That's when he really founded the Maersk that we know, uh, and with the logo of the Northern Star there. And this became later on, because of their massive success, business success and acumen, they managed to reach the ranks of Danish nobility, and they received a coat of arms from the royal family, a letter of patent, I believe, and that's how Maersk became something. It was a very interesting moment, so I thought sharing that story kind of gives you a very different impression. And to this day, the family is still very religious because of that, more than anything else, because they believe, and it seems to be a small, so not that is the case. It was a huge miracle. I would never want to be in that situation, and that's a situation I don't wish to anybody to be in. What a horrible situation to be in. Hardworking people have always been. It's beautiful, beautiful. If you next time you trash billionaires and all that, think about that. Think about their humble beginnings. Think about how they became something and someone's. It didn't come for free. It was not thrown in their lap. Believe me. Or if you don't want to believe me, check, check their history. Find it out. You'll see. Humble origins, my friends. Most of the fortunes of today are humble origins. They're not old fortunes. Those are very few. I would say about 20% as far as research goes. 80% is new fortunes. It keeps flowing. It transforms itself. Cash flows. But back to the topic. So they sent Vance to Greenland to try to meddle in the Danish election there. And that angered the Greenlanders very much, especially after they compared what the US had to offer in comparison to what the Danes already offer. The Danes, like in comparison, like for instance, I mentioned that they wouldn't technically be even present in the American Congress, right? They would never, not really have proper representation there, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what if I'm right? So, together with that, there's several other things related. We all know how horrible, how horrifying, how dystopic the American healthcare system is, how expensive it is. And while the Danes provide very good, top quality, it is uh, paid for healthcare system. Greenlanders, they also have buildings in Denmark, all over, all across Denmark, where they get to live if they want. If they are a bit tired of Greenland and they want to move to Denmark, they literally have buildings that only people from Greenland can live in. The Danish government provide them even residence in Denmark. They are very well taken care of. And at the same time, they are given autonomy over Greenland. So, and plus, they are technically 8% of the Danish parliament in comparison to the American Congress, that they would be nobodies. And everybody could just tell them what to do. In the Danish parliament, that is, I believe, the equivalent to the American Congress, they are 1/8 of the power. So that's big. That's something. That is a lot, right? So they have very strong influence in the Danish parliament. So their vote really matters there. And they are highly respected and highly regarded by the Danes. And the royals visit constantly. Um, they literally they have everything, and plus Danish companies opportunities with the Danish companies. So it's why leave that, right? So the Greenlanders they were so outraged that 85% of them voted to remain Dane, just to spite the Americans. They literally they were so mad at the Americans for trying that kind of sleazy attempt that they even decided to vote in a large majority to remain Danish just to spite because they know they can vote anytime they want to become free. The Danes won't really fight them for it. But because they have such good connection with Denmark and such good times, and they literally have everything, anything they want, why should they leave? For now, it's a pretty good deal, right? They are respected, they are regarded, they have their autonomy, they have the Danish healthcare, the Danish welfare, the Danish everything, so they don't need to worry. So the Greenlanders, because once tried that sleazy thing, because in Scandinavian culture, Greenland is technically Scandinavian, like culturally, this is seen as very sleazy. I don't know about the United States, how you perceive that, but in Scandinavian countries, that kind of attempt is very sleazy. And it was not well seen, and the Greenlanders were outraged because it insulted their intelligence in many levels, right? Because they compare first, okay, are you proposing? Okay, let's check. What? Is that what you're proposing? Are you nuts? Get out of here. So the Greenlanders, they actually wanted to lynch Vance. They were gathering to lynch Vance. They were picking up rocks and everything. And I know this because the the Danes had to bring police from Denmark to make sure that the Greenlanders they brought 100 police officers to make sure that the Greenlanders would not stone Vance to death, literally, because you don't know Greenlanders. They hate everyone. Like they hate foreigners, all kind of foreigners. They don't like them. I spent some time with Greenlanders. It's an event. The new generation is more chill, but the old generation, oh, they hate it. They really do. There was more than once that an angry Greenlander came up to me and started shouting. And I remember that this hostel I was, and there was this old, and I was watching something, and I had the remote that day, and he tried to slap the remote out of my hand. That's a old Greenlander, right? They don't talk with you. Uh, I thought it was the funniest thing because I was kind of double his size. He wasn't afraid of me. But but the new generation are fine. The last young Greenland, I gave him my lighter because he didn't have one, nobody had one, so I decided to give him a lighter. I don't use it. I don't smoke, so I have it for practical purposes. If someday I need it, it's right there in my pocket, right? So, but I don't really need it. But rather have not than need a what? Rather have a need not, yes, than to need a have not. So Vance went pretty bad because Vance is not charismatic. I know The MAGA people are trying to pull him up, and oh, he's so cool, he's this, he's that. No, dude, he's not. He has zero charisma, zero. If he's elected, be sure that they paid for it because the guy has zero. In the contrary, every time he opens his mouth, he angers someone. Someone gets aggravated. And it's not like Donald Trump that you think, oh man, that was witty, that was a good one, right? No, no, this guy, oh, he's so rude, but in a very trolly way, in a very mimetic way. So for a guy like me, it's funny to listen to him because he's all about provocation, right? And if you know anything about me, like I made a career out of being as someone who wrote about my project, one of my projects, uh, uh, transgressive nature of my philosophy, as that person put it. Um, so I get Trump, right? Like he teases to try to make people think and all that. But I'm not happy with what Trump tried to do because he was really. Now I'm going to get into the more serious part while this was going on, right? Because they did that and Trump threatened, but it was not just a threat. Because if you know anything about Trump, he doesn't do empty threats. Well, most of the time he does, but you get the point. He's capable of keeping up with his threat if he really needs to. And he did threaten several times that invasion was in the menu, and it was. So much so that there was an American fleet that was on its way to Denmark. At the same time that Trump was making threats and Vance was trying to steal the election, um, the Americans sent a fleet towards Greenland. They were going in that direction. They were going to attempt a gunboat diplomacy, like they did with Japan. They were going to try that one. But you see, that's the thing, because after all, Denmark is such a small country. What can they do? Am I right? Well, there's this thing called NATO. And NATO, much to the American surprise, is actually, they stick to the rules, as Europeans usually do. And Trump, I think Trump didn't expect that because I believe for the first time when NATO saw what was going on up there, Trump's threats, and they saw that there was an American fleet on its way to Greenland, you won't find it anywhere, by the way. It vanished. Back then, there were still a few articles about it, that the Americans sent a small fleet because they were almost certain in their delusions. It's the American dream because they are really asleep. They are dreaming because that is as unrealistic as it can possibly be. So, thing is that not just NATO, Denmark has several treaties with several countries. We have the Nordic country military treatment treaties, and we have the European countries military treaties. So Danes are not just dependent on NATO. They have all the other treaties they have around the world. So when NATO got the news that the fleet was on its way, they had a reunion. They had an extraordinary meeting from NATO that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm right, that for the first time in the history of NATO, it did not have American participation. They did not let the Americans participate in this extraordinary meeting that was to debate Articles 4 and 5 of NATO. that has to do with invasion of a NATO country by a foreign country and the invasion of a NATO country by a fellow NATO ally. And this uh, activated after the meeting, 1 hour after, they activated the Canadian fleet and the French fleet. And the Canadians and the French, they sent fleet to the region. While Vance was there still trying to get people to vote for the Americans, or at least to visit someone, all Greenlanders refused out of principle. Remember, there were 15%, but they didn't vote to join America. 15% they voted. I believe there were 5% of people who considered voting for America. But most, of the 15% were about Greenland independence. It's probably the old generation. As I met them, it's probably the old generation. So it was a very critical situation. We could have had a war if the Americans were really hard headed about it. But when they saw, I don't think they expected that. Because immediately, and France say, look, the base that the Americans occupy, it's a NATO base. And that's a detail that American media tends to forget. It's not an American base, it's a NATO base. We can say, oh, the Americans built it. But they built it for NATO purposes. It's a NATO base above anything else. So the French offered to occupy the military base. And because of this whole situation and Trump's threat, and then when Vance got news that the French and Canadian navies were in their way to meet the American fleet, uh, that's when Vance rushed to, because in the video you can see he rushed. Suddenly they all run into their group of cars there, and they rushed to the military base, to the military NATO base where the Americans are. 200 American soldiers. What happens next? What happens next is that the Danes, again after this NATO meeting, the Danes they sent the Danish special forces. They sent drone units, and they sent the navy. Although they did had 2 ships already in the region, but they sent more. So they really reinforced. Plus the Danish troops that are already there. I don't know if you know, but they have Danish troops in Greenland at all times. But they reinforced it considerably, you know. So especially to take care of those 200 Americans. And NATO was considering, like, if it came to something, what would happen with the American bases or the NATO bases that the Americans currently occupy. Let's start combating silly propaganda, because that's what those bases are. They're NATO bases. Uh, if there would have been a conflict, the Americans would have been surrendered. Like they would have to lay down their weapons, and I believe the Americans would do that because they wouldn't stand a chance. They wouldn't really stand a chance against the local European countries that they happen to be in. They wouldn't stand a chance. They don't have enough troops. So it was all very premeditated. It was a risk. And Trump is a risk taker. And he lost considerably, and he lost the support of Denmark and several other countries because of that betrayal. And I can say it with open heart, it's betrayal. Because if anything, Denmark has always spilled blood for the United States. What has the United States done for Denmark that I can remember? Nothing really. Nothing. Oh, World War II. The British, technically, one could say, liberated us because Denmark was already one. When we heard the news that the British were on the way, the Danish troops rebelled and they killed a lot of Germans soldiers in the process. So the Germans were already subdued when the British entered Denmark. So the Danes defeated the Nazis inside Denmark before the British forces arrived. So they had given up. So there were lots of shootings there. It was crazy. So basically, the United States failed in a coup attempt in Greenland in an attempt to reignite the gunboat diplomacy. Was very bad for their relationship, so much so that Denmark, in retaliation, we bought the railway rights in Panama. So this means that now, whenever there's a ship transportation throughout the channel, because what helps the ships cross the channel are the parallel railway system in Panama that drags the ships via trains, or not train, but you get the point. So what happened was that big betrayal from the United States for a little country that has always sacrificed their own people for the United States. Since their revolution, uh, Danes not just funded part of the American war, they also were one of the first countries, either the second or third, if not the first, I don't remember, but it was one of the three first to recognize American independence, American as a sovereign country from all the other countries. So we rushed into to officialize the Americans as a sovereign country, and we spilled blood again in the American Revolution. Sorry, in the American Civil War, where we fought. Danes fought. They had a regiment at the side of the Union. And then there were the other American wars, the Korean War. Danes were there fighting for the Americans. Then all the other wars. You mentioned a recent war that the United States was involved. You'll see Danes fighting there. And we are not that many people, and we spilled technically, in terms of proportion, the Danes spilled a lot of blood for the Americans. And again, what have the Americans ever done to us as a thank you? Nothing. They haven't done nothing. And now they want Greenland. No, no way. It's a matter of principle more than anything else. Right? You can't stand for that. So, yeah, it failed miserably. The American fleet had to retreat. Man, are they the real surrender monkeys? The new surrender monkeys? They kidnapped that from the title from the French, because it surely seems so. Because that's what happened. They had no choice. Either they would start a war, or they have to retreat, and they chose wisely. Although it's not completely wisely, because if it was really wisely, Trump would have never tried that. They would have never attempted that. And I really think that the plan B was to if the Greenlanders killed Vance, which was very, very possible, at least until the police came. Um, I don't doubt that they would have killed, the Americans would have killed Vance and used it as an excuse. And thus, the American fleet would be arriving about the same time that they announced that Vance died, right? For whatever means, instead of being inside the American base where he is safe. So, or rather, the NATO base that is in the hands currently of the United States, the 200 people there. So, not so many people, not so many Greenlanders, but not so many Americans there either, right? So, it's a very awkward situation. Nobody really understood why they had to do that, but they did it, and they're paying a high price because now it's on, and there are many troops and Danish troops um, in Greenland right now, and with full Greenland support, rightfully so. What would you do in their place, right? So it's just sad. You know, we fought in the Korean War, we fought in the Gulf War, with every war that the Americans needed help fighting, we were there, spilling our blood for the American people. You know, at some point you have to consider refund or return. That is going to be a problem for Americans for a long time. But hey, Danes have a good diplomacy currently, at least. They didn't used to, but nowadays they have. And they would tackle that too. I have no doubt. But yeah, NATO was activated against the United States at least once. So let that sink in, folks. That's the current status of the United States. Because the Americans are broke, and Trump knows it, and Trump is trying to find a solution, but he can't really, because what the Americans are owing in money, no country in the world, as far as I know of, has ever owed so many money, so much money. You know, and the sad part is that this became that big in 35 years. It jumped from billions to trillions in a matter of 35 years. So 35 years ago, the American national debt was still in the billions. They could afford paying it. Not anymore. So I just wanted to share, so now you know, if you reach this far, that the United States attempted a coup. They attempted to use the good old gunboat diplomacy, and they failed miserably because not only the Danes didn't cave, the Greenlanders took the Danish side, and now they are mad at the United States for even daring to suggest, because they know what they would become if they did join, right? They would be exploited to the core, kicked out to the curb, with no right to complain whatsoever about treatment or whatever. So, yeah, the Americans lost that one. They attempted a coup. They attempted a gunboat diplomacy. They couldn't even reach there, so fast everything is nowadays. So they couldn't fool anyone really. And it was a sad moment for the trust that we have towards the Americans. It's gone. It's completely gone. And I don't think it's going to return very soon. And when I say that, when the Europeans say that, by very soon you consider 100 years or a few hundred years. So take it easy, American people. Don't let him do that again. But I have a sense that one of Vance's platform, if he ever runs, unless they choose a new one, because somehow whatever Vance did made him become very unpopular. So he will attempt that again. When he's elected, he will try to pull that one off. Because, amongst other reasons, I have reason to conclude personally, it's a personal opinion as in so far, but an educated one, that one of Vance's platforms will be taking Greenland. So mark my words, because I know it's coming. They're going to try again, and it's going to fail miserably, and that's not good. The more they keep trying, the less they're going to achieve. Don't you ever do that with Danes. They really don't take it lightly. They technically lose their minds because they can't admit that kind of stuff. They can't. It's a cultural thing. They flip. They don't care. That's when Danes lose it. When you do stupid things like that. So may that be a lesson for us all. That's all I have to say about the matter for now. But yeah, it's a disgrace what the Americans tried to do. Backfired spectacularly. And now Greenland is defended as it has never been. So with drones and everything. So yeah, we made it. I just wanted to share my thoughts.